Hi, my name is Evie Gibbons, and in this PowerPoint/vodcast, I will be discussing about Section B, Page to Stage, Realising a Performance Text of the Edexcel Drama and Theatre Studies A-Level. This is a guide to help you achieve perfect essay writing for Section B of the exam, which you will have to take at the end of the full 2-year A-Level course, which is 2.5 hours long. This Section B is worth 32 marks. There are usually 2 questions for this section. It's recommended that you spend 1 hour on this section, spending 30 minutes on each question. You should spend 5 of your 30 minutes planning for each question. This section is also about being aware of the range of methods of working both as a performer and a designer, and be able to explain how to put these into practice within the performance text you have been set. One question asks you to approach the text as a performer, the other question asks you to approach the text as a designer. Here, as you can see, is the list of the possible set text that you could be set. So, Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo, Colder Than Here, Laura Wade, Equus, Peter Schaffer, Fences, August Wilson, Mackinac, Sophie Treadwell, That Face, Polly Stenham. And also a note, you are not allowed to take any of these texts into the exam room with you. When approaching the text as a performer, you have to work with 5 basic tools. These are intellect, imagination, feelings, body, and voice. You'll need to work on these 5 tools consciously in order to let your unconscious work as you get into the role. Tool number 1, intellect. This involves being familiar with the text, so reading the text very carefully, imagining how it will be on stage and in performance, considering research, and considering Stanislavski's given circumstances and objectives of characters. Stanislavski's idea of given circumstances involves focusing on the way particular roles are performed within the set text. So when you start thinking about the characters in your performance text, it helps to be systematic. You could do this by making a full list of any relevant information that a text gives you. Stanislavski's objectives is another term that has been widely adopted in the theatre. A character on stage always wants something. Objectives help the actor to define clearly in words what that something is. So there are 2 kinds of objectives. There are short-term objectives and through objectives. The difference between these objectives are that through objectives last for the entire play, but short-term objectives obviously don't last for the entire play. One other thing, objectives usually meet with obstacles. These may be overcome or they may ultimately defeat the objective. Additionally, objectives should lead to action. Finally, when considering research, rather than start by searching the title on the internet, you can make a list of questions you think would be good to explore. So, for example, what issues did the early reviews mention? What period does the play belong to? Is it associated with any particular style of theatre? Is it based on or inspired by any historical incidents? Are there contemporary issues or events that influence the play? What would the costume, furniture and props have been like in the original performance? And don't just heavily rely on just the internet, because it may not always be reliable. So try to look for other sources for research material. So for example, books, reviews, introductions to play text, museums, the National Theatre, databases. Tool number 2, imagination, involves doing group work, which incorporates things like improvisation, proxemics, set elements, etc. Also becoming familiar with character, also by doing individual work. After having created a table of character information from your text, which you would have done from the Stanislavski's given circumstances idea from tool number 1, intellect, you will find there are things that must have happened that can't actually be located in the script. At this point, you can begin to use your imagination to fill in the gaps and develop your sense of the character. Also, imagining scenes between characters that are seen with off-stage characters can lead to a fuller understanding of a character. Remember also to imagine the whole world of the play. Try to visualise the settings, the furniture, the props, the social settings and anything else that comes to mind. By doing group work, you are helping to build your understanding of a character and their world through the use of imagination. Discussion between group members can open up possibilities that you may have not thought about. As a group, you should do activities which are related to the performance text. Also, when you are doing these activities, you should keep an open mind and try not to be self-conscious. The more you explore your character and the more you can imagine the gaps in between what you actually know, the better your understanding and performance will be. You can do activities which incorporate improvisation, imagination, proxemics, costumes and props, set elements, sound and light. In brief, for improvisation, you could do activities such as hot seating, conscious alley or thought alley, giving presents, or home alone. For imagination, you could do things like personal props, letters and diaries, prepared monologues, or subtext exercises. Moving on to tool number 3, feelings. Your feelings in a scene will be generated by the specifics of the situation and the character. You can't force these, they need to arise from your work on the text and with your group. One way of practicing this is to use a technique called emotion memory, which derives from Stanislavski. By exploring your own memory bank of feelings, so for example jealousy, anger, embarrassment and so on, you can empathise more effectively with the feelings of a character in a given situation and therefore play the scene more truthfully. While this can be applied to any situation where emotions are involved, it can be particularly useful when applied to characters in extreme states. Your voice and your body, the next two tools to be explored, can both be used to show your feelings. Tool number 4, voice, involves studying the language of the text, thinking about what kind of voice your character has, and being able to describe the voice and its particular qualities. Recognising the kind of language used in general or by a particular character is an important way to start exploring voice. The language will give you a feeling for the world of the play. Here are some basic questions you need to ask yourself. Is the language naturalistic or non-naturalistic? Is the language formal or informal? Is it written in prose or verse? Is the language literal or figurative? Once you understand what kind of language is used within the performance text, you can start to work on your text and the characters, thinking about how you can best speak your lines. There are several factors that affect how characters in plays talk. Among the most important are the character's background, education and experience, the character's status in the scene, the situation/given circumstances, the style of the play, and the character's objective/intention. When describing the qualities of the voice, you have these elements to work with: pitch, range, pace, use of pauses, tone, volume, and articulation. For tool number 5, body, you can and should develop ways of moving and being that are appropriate for your character. The body can be used in conjunction with the voice, the way you move in conjunction with the way you speak. However, your body can give many clues even when you are not speaking. This is known as non-verbal communication. This is the main thing that you should think about when approaching tool number 5. This is any form of on-stage action that conveys meaning to an audience. This will include gesture, facial expression, movement, mime, tableau, dance, or mask work. The several factors I mentioned before about how things can affect how characters in plays talk also applies to body. Briefly again, these are the character's background, education and experience, the character's status in the scene, the situation/given circumstances, the style of the play, or the character's objective/intention. When approaching the text as a designer, you have to think about and consider set, what period the play is set in, what is the geographical and social setting, which stage form, are there any large complicated set elements or props to consider, how many different settings are there, how is the space used in each of the play's scenes, how many exits, entrances are required, are levels necessary or potentially helpful, does the setting need to be realistic, costume design, lighting and sound. Each designer, whether they are a set designer, costume designer, lighting designer, or sound designer, needs to have a close knowledge of the text, be able to solve practical problems, consider the venue and stage form, and finally consider the world of the play, including the mood and the atmosphere. Now I'll be looking more deeply into costume. This needs to go hand in hand with set design. You will need to consider the same areas as a set designer would, so period, style, social class and occupation. This requires research, so read the play closely for specific details of the costumes. Think about character, so the fit, colour, texture and function. Now I'll be looking at lighting. So you have to create a mood and atmosphere to enhance the play's action. So the set needs to be lit as well as will the actors, so the design should be created with close knowledge of the text and in close cooperation with set designers. The Basic lighting tools that a lighting designer would use are intensity/level, direction/angle, colour, diffusion, lighting as scenery. Here are some exam question examples. So for the first one, that is the performer question. So as a performer, outline how you would use voice to create an impact on the audience in the portrayal of one character in this extract. Your answer should make reference to the performance text as a whole. As you can see, I've highlighted the key words in red, the keywords that you should be really looking at when you are answering the question. Also, as you can see, both questions, for the performer question and the designer question, asks you that your answer should make reference to the performance text as a whole. So, this means that your answer should make reference to things that happened on earlier in the play or later on in the play, backed up with quotes. Now, moving on to basic essay structure for your response. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? You need an introduction, middle section, and conclusion, just like in any essay. For example, for English, you need an introduction, middle section, and conclusion. First, let's look at the introduction. Your introduction should depend on the question, so place scene in the context of the development of the play. For a performer question, this might mean mentioning the development of the plot, the characters, or relationships. For the designer question, this might mean mentioning the set requirements for other scenes and any change to the set that signal a change in atmosphere for the extract. In terms of writing, you should get to grips immediately with the topic set, no waffling. You should reassure the reader that you're going to answer the topic set, and only that. You should focus on the topic in the question from the first sentence on, so be specific in relating to the key areas of the topic and map out the ground you intend to cover in the body of your essay. You should summarise your most important ideas for dealing with the extract. Don't worry about the details at this point. This is just the introduction. You should aim for constructing your opening line like this first example that I will mention. This is an example for a performer question. The first opening example is the better one. So, my main aim would be to show how Jenna is trying hard to keep her grief under control. The second example is, I would make sure Jenna keeps her face hidden as much as possible. This first example is the better example. The middle section is where you will score most of your marks. This is where you talk about the details. So you focus on ideas about the extract, follow on from main aims mentioned in the introduction. You must have a coherent structure, including a key sentence that makes the key point of the paragraph, followed by a development of that point using specific example and illustration. Then, for the closing sentence for a paragraph, this should round off the paragraph, acting as a summary of the paragraph's content and point the way to the next paragraph, providing a bridge to the next paragraph. You should also use linking phrases at the beginning of the paragraphs to help the reader follow the development of your essay. Here is a mind map of some linking phrases that you can use. Finally, the conclusion. This ties things together so that you can take an overall view of the extract and draw your ideas together to emphasise the main points. You must bring the reader back to the set topic, so draw a conclusion and summarise your evidence. The examiner must be left with the impression of a considered conclusion. You must never add new points to your conclusion. Only summarise and conclude your main points from earlier in the essay. So, basically providing an effective, concise summary of the points you made in the middle section. You could also add some useful comments that place the extract in the context of the play as a whole. Last point to mention, your conclusion should be fairly short, just like the introduction was.